Yeah.
How
Okay.
are you, sir?
Okay. How do you do?
Good, good. Lovely to meet you via
That's it.
Zoom. Thank you very much for accepting my request.
Okay.
I'm very grateful to you for this opportunity. Thank you. To begin with, I was reading somewhere that the first time that you decided to do what you went on to do very successfully, it was when you went to the States from Canada, and when you were supposed to go back to Canada after your trip to the US and to look after your father's shop, and then you saw a play in New York. It was called A Streetcar Named Desire, played by a young actor called Marlon Brando. So would you let me know your thoughts and your recollections from that play?
Okay. You've got the facts. Those are the facts, more or less. Uh, I was trying to get a job in the creative world. I fancied myself as a writer, so I wrote to every publication possible in Canada and in Ontario specifically to see if I could get a job. And this went on for months, and I couldn't. I was a university graduate who couldn't get a job in the creative world, certainly not in any Toronto newspaper or anything such. Anyway, my brother and I, my older brother and I, decided we'd take over the family shop since my father was such a terrible businessman, and it was at the moment making money. Usually it lost money, and he often went bankrupt. So we decided we'd take it over. But I said to my brother, before we settle down to the life bourgeois, I'm going to go and do my thing in New York. So I went to New York just for that weekend. I'd be back, and we'd start up the business. Or take over the business. And I went, and as you say, by chance, I heard about this play, quite a bit about this play by Tennessee Williams, whose work I already knew, of course, and an absolutely unknown actor to me at that time, unknown to most of the world, called Marlon Brando. And I went in, I got a pretty good single seat in the stalls, and watched the show, and came out of the theater determined, no matter what, to go get into the creative world. So I telegrammed my brother. That shows how long ago it was. You telegrammed, it's not phoned, and said, "You take over the business. I'm going to do what I can to keep up, to get into the world of creative," and I did.
And eventually you went back to Canada, and then you got an offer from the BBC. Am I correct? And then you traveled to the UK after that, and
Yeah,
then you
you
got
make
involved making
yeah,
your television films for the BBC.
yeah, your timing is a bit strange. I only went to New York for the weekend. I was living in Canada, so when that weekend was finished, I was back in Canada, and I did eventually get various jobs in creative world. Even to the extent that some of it very good, some of it pretty bad. Various newspapers in Ontario, and then about 3 years after the thing of the Brando thing, I'd written some things for television, which was just starting in Toronto, in Canada. The CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, had not broadcast anything yet. We were all still experimenting in the studios. And somebody said to me, "I think you should go over to see what's happening in England. Television is a British invention," which I didn't know. I presume, like all inventions, it was American. And see what the BBC make of television, and especially television drama. So with the CBC's blessing and sort of a letter of introduction or two, I went to England and took the Canadian Pacific boat over from Quebec to Liverpool, and was told on the boat going over that the BBC never hires outsiders, and I wouldn't get any work or anything. Anyway, 3 days after landing in London, I got my first professional writing task, and that slowly escalated until I was writing more and more for the BBC. There was only one network on the air at the time in England. That was the BBC, had one network, which was on not 24 hours a day either in those days, but it was the sole source of television and television income. And so I wrote several things. Eventually, I was given a big assignment, which was to adapt a book for drama, television drama. That book was The Troubled Air by Irwin Shaw. It was an American book about the troubles in New York with communists being fired from the networks in America. And I adapted that. And as a consequence of that and a few other things, I was then asked by the BBC if I'd like to take, purely as a guest, their television directors and producers course. And of course I said yes, because as any young man would, and I did it. And then that eventually led to my career as a director at the BBC. Yes.
And as you mentioned, it was right at the beginning of television in the 1950s. So what was so different at the BBC, and how much control did the directors they had over like various choices at the time?
I'm sorry, you're going to have to be clearer about that, Amir. What do you mean by various choices?
No, like for instance, like the budget of your films made for television, over the choice of actors and all that. Did you have any say?
Yeah, you're talking about the freedom on that. First of all, you keep talking about film and television. There's nothing on film for television except little inserts. Television was all live. And television drama was live, broadcast live from a studio. Okay, how much control did one have as a director? Huge control. I found the script, found the actors, was given a budget, had to stay within that budget, more or less, etc. So one had complete artistic and creative control.
And seminal, there was a seminal moment in your career when you got to work with a very unknown actor called Sean Connery. And was it because of your then wife's persistence, Jacqueline Hill, to cast him in that role?
Well, Jacqueline's persistence did help. And of course, I considered it because she suggested it, and she was playing the female lead. We weren't married at the time, but and I auditioned as I've written in my book. I've written a book called "Hello, You've Gone." It's gone to a blank screen, Amir.
Oh, I don't know why you can't. Oh yes, I can see that. Let me just stop video again. Oh, okay, right back on. Sorry, yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. We're talking about Sean Connery.
Yes, indeed.
So I'd use Sean. He'd been a walk-on for me as the archive show, a walk-on, an extra, whatever you want to call them, one of those creatures in the background to make up people. He'd been a guard for me. I've got several photos of him as a guard, a non-speaking part, always non-speaking. Occasionally, towards the end of 56, beginning of 57, I would give him a line or two to say because he could say it. And so I auditioned him. As you say, it's in the book. As I was saying, I wrote a book about all this. The book is called "I'm Just the Guy Who Says Action," and it's available on Amazon. I've written a second biography about my meetings with other rich and famous in the business, and it's called "I Need Another Take, Darling." That's also available on Amazon. And so I'm unashamedly plugging them.
Now, I've read both of them, and they riveting reads, both of them, and I enjoyed thoroughly reading them. And one of them, the first one, it got published last year during the pandemic, and the second one just lately. Had yes, I think back in September or October
Yeah.
they came out, and both of them they're absolute riveting reads. And you mentioned, well, we both mentioned Sean Connery, but just before moving on to your next film was the first film that you made for the silver screen. I read somewhere as well, you may correct me if I'm wrong, that Broccoli, Cubby Broccoli, before casting Sean Connery, you received a phone call from him and about the different choices that they had. Patrick McGoolin was one of them, Roger Moore was another, and Sean Connery. And you said, well, that Sean Connery was the right person for you. Is that correct?
Well, it wasn't as simple as that. First of all, it wasn't Cubby Broccoli. I've never met Cubby Broccoli, but Harry Saltzman is a Canadian. And Harry made contact with me for one reason or another, whatever, when I first arrived here in England. And Harry rang me and said, they've discerned, he and Mr. Broccoli, that I'm one of the few people who's worked with the three contenders for James Bond, Roger Moore, Patrick McGowan, and Sean Connery. And what was my opinion? And I said, Patrick McGowan was by far the best actor of the three, by far, no doubt about it. Patrick was an outstanding actor. Roger Moore was the easiest going of the three, very affable. Everybody likes Roger. The moment he walks in the studio, he's befriended by everyone. But that Sean had something that was different. And in my opinion, I thought he was probably the best for the role of James Bond.
And now we should move on to your first foray on the silver screen with Passport to Shame. How did that film come about, and what differences did you encounter between moving from television onto film?
Well, which way around should we do it? The differences are very small. I'd already done inserts, even in Requiem for a Heavyweight. One had to do the exterior sequences in the boxing ring, for instance, on film. So I was used to working on film. What always upset me about Passport was the film industry decided not to hire anybody who was making a name for himself in television, because they were trying to keep television out of their enclosure. They thought, anyway, whatever they thought. They thought of us as rivals. So I had a very good agent, but for love or money, he couldn't get me a good film, a respectable film, a film I wanted to do. And all I continually was offered was exploitation films. And the choice I had was between two films about prostitutes. One was called Passport to Shame. And
Flesh
the
is
other,
Weak.
sorry?
Was that The Flesh is Weak?
The Flesh is Weak was the other one.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was just having trouble remembering. By Raymond Strauss produced it. Anyway, of those, I found the Passport to Shame the more understandable script. So I did Passport to Shame with Eddie Constantine. Working with Eddie was a joy. That was okay. Very, very nice.
Yeah, because you went on to work with him on another film as well, The Treasure of San Teresa.
Correct, yeah.
Yes. Was it your choice to have him back on your second film?
No, he hired me. He got the second.
Oh,
So
wonderful.
I think we did. Did we do three altogether, Eddie and I, or two? Just the two.
Two. Because and then he went on to do Alphaville.
Wait.
Because he went on to make Alphaville.
Oh yes, which I didn't make.
He did in '65, and that was, I think it was partly thanks to you as well with your films. And then now he's become that like very cult actor that he went on to become later on in his life. So now Passport to Shame, it's become a cult classic, and now I think it's they've released it on Blu-ray as well. What do you make of it, working with Diana Dawes, Eddie Constantine, and as a whole, how would you rate it in your filmography? within your filmography?
I really dislike Passport to Shame. I dislike it because it was a film, as I say, I had to make. I dislike its subject. I dislike, and see, to me, typical of the Passport to Shame is if you look at the opening credits, there's something which you won't see in films. I don't think I've ever seen in any other film. Whereas, as you know, most films end with the credits saying directed by. This film did not say that. Passport to Shame ends with directed by being the second last credit, the last credit being produced by Johnny Caine. Johnny Caine was this monster of a man who produced the film, a total hindrance to me in every way. And his taste was in his toes, and it made it very difficult. But to me, this is so shocked Americans when they saw this credit that it reflected badly on Johnny, and he was taken to task for it when he took the film under his wing and showed it in Hollywood. Anyway, so there's some sort of rough justice happened there. But my feelings towards Passport, well, it's a first film. It exercised my ability to tell a whole story on film for an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I guess it convinced people because I went on from there.
Yes, and it's still, because I was watching it the other day, and it still does stand the test of time, in my view.
Who's that? I had some very good actors. Herbert Long. Herbert Long was no slouch of an actor. He had a silly scene to do where he's supposed to jump off the top of the building. I remember that because I remember trying to rationalize with Herbert as to how we get around it. But good actors: Herbert Long, Brenda de Banzi, Diana Dors. As I say in my books, no slouch as a human being and no slouch as an actress. Odile was pleasant enough. Odile Versois, and of course Eddie was very professional, very down to earth, very straightforward, very Parisian French. He introduced me to things consequently in Paris that I've enjoyed.
Oh, okay. Wonderful! It's a wonderful, it's a delightful film to watch. Anyhow, and as you moved on from the 1960s and the 1970s, your career gravitated more towards directing one-off television shows. What was that like a choice of yours to do so?
No, it's mainly because I wasn't. If I'd been offered films, I would have taken them. First of all, films pay much more than television, and still do, to a director, producer, director. So I would have gladly done films, but I wasn't really offered any. I mean, you're saying kind things about Passport, but I don't think it electrified the world. I did. Michael Balkan, the head of Ealing Studios, called me in for a couple of chats. Unfortunately, that went nowhere. I was very upset about that. That was the sort of support I wanted and needed, but didn't get. Though, yes, I went mainly television because I had to feed the children.
And you mentioned Michael Balkan, of course, his grandson. He's one of the greatest living actors of his generation as well, Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yeah.
And you went on to make a one-off television show called Heart by Heart, which was a Eurovision concept kind of show, wasn't it? That like all of the countries within the continent, they had to produce and act this play in their own language at the same time, and it was broadcast at the same time, wasn't it? Heart to Heart, back in 1962.
What year did you say?
Was it 1962 or was it 1957?
No, it was later than both of those.
Heart to Heart, because
I
think it was wasn't it 1962 or 1958? No.
Oh, no, it wasn't in the 50s, was it? Yeah, I think in the 70s myself.
No, Heart to Heart, because it was followed by Comedy Man, wasn't it? Heart to Heart.
Was it? Okay.
Yes. And then you got to work with Kenneth More and Ralph Richardson, and then once you were working there, you got to know Kenneth More very well. And then when he got offered to play in The Comedy Man in '62, he contacted you. So how did that work come about for you, The Comedy Man?
Okay. The Comedy Man, as you say, came about because Kenneth More and I worked together on Heart to Heart. But Heart to Heart, as you said, was a Eurovision idea, a Eurovision gimmick. Every country in the Eurovision nation was to produce its own version of this play. This was a play written by Terence Rattigan, a very distinguished and rightly distinguished a British playwright, probably the best playwright of the era. He'd written this thing called Heart to Heart. The BBC asked me to produce and direct it, which I did. Rattigan said we'd get a star to play in it, and we got Ralph Richardson to play the second lead. So that was a good start. Sir Ralph Richardson, I should say. For the lead, he wanted some guy called Richard Burton. So we went to Rome to enlist Mr. Burton's aid, and he kept saying yes, 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 until the final moment, shortly before rehearsal, when he said no. Terence Rattigan knew Kenneth More as well, so he asked me to go see Kenneth. I saw Kenny, and he agreed to do it. So Kenny Moore and I did Heart to Heart, as you say. Again, a very good cast. Wonderful actors: Jean Marsh, Wendy Craig playing the ladies, etc. And then when Kenny was offered his film called The Comedy Man, he asked me to direct it, and I leapt at it, of course.
And at the time, I was reading in your second book, actually, that at the time of shooting The Comedy Man, Cary Grant was also in the studios revoicing his role for the charade with Audrey Hepburn, and then he surprised you by making an appearance in the studio. Would you take us through that? And you and Joe, your producer, you offered him to have a cameo, to make a cameo in the film, but in return, he was asking for $2 million, didn't he?
Yes, it was absolutely right. I mean, if you're going to ask him to appear in a film, you got to pay his fee. Otherwise, you can't ask him to do it or come to some sort of agreement on the fee. The producer decided that with my help, Cary Grant could be worked into the film, which indeed he could have been, but they hadn't agreed on what sort of price. And Mr. Grant just pointed out that $2 million was his fee. This is in 1969, so $2 million.
In 1962, because right? The Comedy Man, it was made in 1962, but then it took 2 years for its release.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, wonderful. And you've said in your previous interviews that, was it the Bolton brothers who made a lot of cuts to the film, which you were very unhappy about?
Yes. There's at the time, the directors had very little say in their cut of the film. So I edited The Comedy Man to what I wanted, and then Roy Bolton and they took over and re-edited, and then the censor stepped in. And the most hurtful thing about The Comedy Man, the most hurtful particular shot, is I start the love scene between Kenneth More and Angela in bed together, because a classical thing, and I show the bottom of the bed looking up towards the top, and I got 2 pairs of feet, one female, one male, Kenny and Angela's, next to each other, and then Angela lifts her heel, which is big in the screen, her sole of her foot, and scratches the sole of Kenny's foot. And then from that, the camera pans up and begins a long 360-degree turn of the bed. We circle the bed twice during the shot, which takes some doing. Because it means you got to put the set in as the camera moves around. So the censor saw that, and he said, yes, I love the shot, but it's too sexy. So he made me cut. He made the Bolting brothers, or whoever, British Line, cut out the 2 feet scratching each other, which always upset me, because it wasn't my intention as a director. And I think the sensuousness of that was essential to the scene. So it was very upsetting to me. And a few other cuts were made. I very carefully worked out the final sequence was the party sequence, and they decided that they have a different sort of sequence of shots, which I still think is wrong. I think my version is better. But people tell me they enjoy The Comedy Man, so I'm delighted that they are. I'm certainly
like it got released during the swinging 60s London as well, so it was, and some people they just interpreted it as a struggling actor during the swinging 60s. So indeed, so, and it still stands the test of time as well. And then it was so understandably, probably that's why that it took the film 2 years for its worldwide release. And what did you make at the time of its double bill with Lord of the Flies? When
I think the release killed both pictures. Hurt them badly. Whoever wanted to see Lord of the Flies didn't want to see The Comedy Man. Whoever saw The Comedy Man would want to see Lord of the Flies. Both good films, both good subjects. Again, the stupidity of distributors to put them out together. A huge mistake. Wouldn't happen today, I don't think. But as to why they did it, who knows? Different times, I mean, so one has to accept that. But it's really upsetting to remember that it went out on release with a wrong sort of picture. I mean, to go, The Comedy Man is essentially a comedy, a feel-good film. And Lord of the Flies is a very thought-provoking film, each with its own merits, but clashing with each other.
And there came a few accolades in your life in 1967 when you went on to direct a film for television called Call Me Daddy, written by Heblis Gebler, and you won an Emmy, you won many other awards for that role, with Donald Pleasant in the lead role. So what are your thoughts about that production?
Well, unlike The Comedy Man, I'm very proud of that the video. I would ask everybody to watch it. It's a great little 50 minutes of television, which is what we're aiming for. It started because as a sort of, when we first originally read the script, it was going to last about 15 minutes. So Donald and Pleasance, fine actor, Judy Cornwall, fine actress, and I would add scenes. What would they do next? Well, they might do this, they might do that. And so we evolved this script and story, and it was so good. They were so good, the actors, that it won my first Emmy. Yeah, of which I'm very proud.
And then thereafter, they wanted to make a film. Well, the writer wanted to make a film, so he adapted the play for a long feature film, Heblis Gebler, and then there was Peter Sellers, and there was a meeting between you and Peter Sellers and the author, but the author arrived an hour earlier, and he convinced Peter Sellers into dismissing you as a director and replacing himself.
That's right.
Instead.
Yes, that's right. So the sort of man he was, he should he should have been grateful for this director and cast who'd taken this little sketch idea and made it into such a good property that it was now going to be made into a film with one of the leading actors at the time, Peter Sellers. Instead, what happened was he made sure that he knifed me in the back, reputation-wise, and went on to ask that he directed himself. That's my wife.
Hello. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Hi. Interview.
No, not at all. Oh, wonderful. Just so and then when you went on to get along very well with Peter Sellers once the shooting started.
I didn't get that.
So you went on to get along very well.
Yes. Yeah. Very well. He was that sort of man, mind you, very volatile, up, down, throughout, as he was with people throughout his life. And in fact, some people recently, fairly within the last couple of years before the pandemic, there was a big meeting about Peter Sellers with other directors and actors who worked about talking about him. And the consensus then was that Peter was mad. I mean, literally mad. I didn't believe that. I thought he was a man with a lot of problems mentally and any other way. But he wasn't mad. Unreasonable, eccentric, incoherent sometimes, but also he'd had this strange career. And the man had been pronounced dead on a table in Los Angeles.
And then he came back to life right after that, didn't he?
Yeah, he'd been dead, they said, for like 8 minutes or something when they resuscitated him. And so anyone who's been through that is going to have an effect on his mental abilities and his skills, obviously. But Peter and I went on to become good friends until inevitably we separated and we clashed, and he became an enemy. And he decided he'd had an affair with
Sinead, yes, on the set.
And that ended very unhappily. So that turned Peter against the film completely. And he said he hated it, that he wanted a remake, and he was going to buy up the costs, the negative, and reshoot it. He would direct it, etc. Of course, never happened.
Was it at the BFI that you watched it last?
Yes. Well, a few months ago. Just
yeah. Did like those recollections get back to you while watching it?
No,
what do you think of it?
I realize why it was not the success it was. It's a very, very difficult subject. A man holding a woman captive is almost impossible as a subject, and rightly so. So I don't think, I think I would, if I were doing it now, I would devote more time to changing the script, to showing the woman's point of view more than exists on Hoffman. What do I think of it? I think Jeanette's performance and Peter's performance are both very good. In fact, my cast of the usual stalwarts are all, there's no one lets me down. It's a very strange subject, and probably best not to be shown ever again. But I'm just going to throw something in here. One of the things around that same time that I did was in the mid-70s, is The Adventures of Don Quixote.
With Rex Harrison.
That's right. And Frank Finlay as Sancho Panza and Rosemary Leach. And the BBC have it. The BBC commissioned it with CBS. They both screened it. Terrific notices. I'm really, really, really proud of that film. And nobody can screen it. Nobody seems to be able to get access to it. And I don't know why the BBC are sitting on it. And So one of the frustrations in my life.
Yeah, I would have loved to watch it. I tried to have access to it as well, but I couldn't. Have you directly contacted the BBC officials?
Yeah, yes,
And
yes. I don't know how to contact them.
let me just move on to your next film, following Huffman, which was Say Hello to Yesterday. And
Yeah,
got to work with Gene Simmons, who was
yeah,
yet another class actor from her generation.
yeah.
And is that right that she injured her foot during the shooting and she went to the hospital, and then when she came back, she carried on filming for you?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so how did that injury come about? And
You sure it was Gene Simmons who injured herself? I
yeah,
think it was. I think it was Evelyn Lay.
oh, was it?
Yeah, I think she had a scene where Evelyn had a scene where she flopped on the settee with Leonard Whiting, and she flopped on the settee and hurt her thigh as she did. She landed badly, and she hurt her thigh, and I think broke her arm. And so she was in the cast, which she had to disguise for the rest of the film. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, pardon me. So yes, it must have been her. And then I was reading somewhere that, like, while shooting it on the King's Road, Rod Steiger walked past the crew and offered you to appear as just like an extra in the film.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Well, as you just described, I was there shooting on a public street, a small little square in Chelsea, and suddenly Rod appears, and we'd worked together a couple of times. And he said, "Do you want me to walk through as an extra?" I said, "Sure, why not? Let's see if anybody recognizes you." And people do when they see it. It's in the film.
And then when the publicity for the film came about, he was the third name on the billing, wasn't he?
Yes. In some countries, they gave him billing as well, which is again unheard of, because you're going to do that. He should have been paid a fee, and of course, he wasn't paid anything.
So unlike Cary Grant, he was very shrewd and he said no.
Exactly.
Oh, wonderful. So do you have any recollections from making that film? Did you enjoy making it?
Which one are we talking about now?
Say Hello to Yesterday.
Yes, of course, I enjoyed it enormously because I wrote it as well. I co-wrote it. We did it as an exercise. A friend of mine had lost his partner, Ray Matthew, and we decided to, in order to distract him, I said, "Let's write a film." So we did. We wrote Say Hello Yesterday. He said, "We will pick a subject," and he said, "Okay, this older man and this young woman." I said, "That happens every day. It's tougher to do it the other way around. Let's make it an older woman and a younger man." And so we did. I'm not sure that it's successful because of that, because there is a bit of an unnatural balance in that relationship. But I think it's a good picture. I'm quite proud of it.
Oh, wonderful. And you've said in the past that out of all those music themes made for your films, the one that really stands out for you, it's the song by Matt Monro for Huffman. Why is that?
Well, it seemed to capture the mood. The music captured the mood. I'd left the film because of, I don't know why, and I wasn't around when the music was first submitted. But when I heard it, I was dubious to start with, but I became more and more entranced with it. And now, looking back, I think it's one of the major benefits of the film is that opening soundtrack with the song.
Oh, it's a wonderful song, and it's a wonderful film, and it's one of those films that still stands the test of time. And I think for many generations to come, that film will be remembered, surely. And one of the proudest moments in your career was working undoubtedly with Sir Laurence Olivier on the set of Voyage Round My Father, isn't it?
Yes. Well, yeah, the man was a great figure in British theater and cinema and in all aspects of the profession, and a superb actor. He was a much older man when I worked with him, and he wasn't terribly well sometimes, some days. But I'm very proud of The Voyage Around My Father. Again, talk of films being mutilated. Voyage has been mutilated by various television companies, because they keep cutting it down to make it fit into various lengths. And one of the most upsetting things is the opening shot. I deliberately made took a rose, and had it out of focus and bring it into focus to sort of start things off. And people cut the out of focus bit, so it's just it's all over the place. There's some messy editing that exists in Voyage Around My Father, but if you can get an unedited version, which exists, I feel it's still good, and I'm still very proud of it. I'm very proud of the performance I got out of Olivier, and he wasn't easy to work with. He was a man who knew what he wanted, etc., and sometimes determined to get his way. He wasn't always right, but anyway, it was a great joy to work with him and to do it.
And also, what I've noticed in your films is that apart from directing a film, you also want to convey. You're a wonderful storyteller as well, isn't it? For you, storytelling is very important. It stands out, doesn't it, while making a film?
I think it's the most important thing about a film is to tell a story and make sure it's a story that the audience can be aware of, identify with if necessary, enjoy, or even not enjoy, but at least see the aspects of it as a story. I've just been watching a number of BAFTA nominations for this year's award, and it amazes me how badly some of the stories are told. What's even worse is these days is that most films are padded out. I see most films of 2 hours length and thinking that this film should be an hour 35 at most, and it'll be a much better film. So that sort of padding has affected the storytelling and affected the audience too. I think half of them go to sleep and some of them, because the storytelling is so bad.
Indeed, absolutely. I couldn't agree anymore. And it's not only about storytelling, it's also like the music of the films that they don't stand out anymore. It's about like the whole assemble of like the actors as well. Most of the time they've been miscast, perhaps, films, and it's such a shame that like films they're not anymore what they used to be.
Yeah.
And speaking of what like films and the magic of movies, you got to work with a lot of really like real stars. But one star that didn't go down well working with, it was Bette Davis. Would you tell us the story?
Didn't go down well at all. She had me fired from the film. Yes, okay. It's a Hammer film. Again, a very weak script. It's called The Anniversary. It was never going to be a great film. Interesting story, but not a great version of it. The story of a mother who dominates her children, and then when finds out her youngest son, whom she loves more than the other ones, I think she has 3 sons, if I remember correct. She finds out the girl, his fiance that he selected, is brought home to meet his mother, has a thing about her ears being bad, and so Betty insisted that to add to the badness, for want of a better word, that we misshape the ears, that they have some sort of horrible disease on them, which will show visually. And so I said I thought that was wrong. It's all psychological. The girl has to think about her ears, but there's nothing really wrong with them. Is what's in the script. Betty insisted that we try just malforming the girl's ears. We did, off with the young lady, Elaine Taylor, the actress, to have it done. Came back a couple of hours later with a misshapen, distorted, and variously colored ear. And that's it. That's what I wanted. That's perfect. Then she said, "Now covered. I never want to see it again." So I said, "You mean you want this actress to go into the makeup room every day, get an ear, which will take a few hours, distort it, and then hide it so it's not seen?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, I pointed out I thought this was unreasonable. I don't think I shouted. I don't think I raised my voice. I'm not that sort of fella. I'm not that sort of director to a disagreeing actor. However, because I disagreed with her, she stormed off the set, and I was called into the producer's office and told to leave the film, which I did.
And throughout your career, there's been like a few times that you've been dismissed from a few productions, but you've always bounced back even stronger. So has it been your philosophy in life, always bouncing back, even at your lowest ebb?
The term "bouncing back" always suggests, yeah, I'll show them. I think that's nonsense. I think once you've been hit by being fired, whether it's by Betty Davis or by a newspaper up in the north of Ontario, which I was, once you've been fired, it takes a while to recuperate and to get over it. But life being life, you go on. When bouncing back is too vivacious a term. You pick yourself up, start all over again, as the song says, and I think that's more like the description of what happens. And so each time I was knocked down, and I've been knocked down a few times, I picked myself up eventually and started all over again eventually, and it did.
In '79, you made a film with the great Ava Gardner, which was the genre of the film. It was a disaster film, the genre. And so, because I think that was like the first disaster film that you were working on. So how did you experience that?
Well, I enjoyed making the film. I enjoyed working with Ava Gardner. I enjoyed her as a person. She had a drink problem at the time, but it was a problem that's surmountable. And I enjoyed. Henry Fonda was in that picture too, so I enjoyed working with these famous Hollywood names, made up for Betty Davis because they were such nice people.
Did you ever visit Hollywood at the time?
Of course.
How many times, and what was your impression from Hollywood?
Well, my impression was that I regretted not being able to crack into it. I didn't get the right sort of agents or breaks or looking. I didn't persevere enough. I think that was the real thing. I think you want to crack Hollywood, you got to pack your bags and move in there and live the life and get around so people know who you are. I didn't do that. I've enjoyed my life in England. It surprised me that I spent my life in England because I adore my native country, Canada. I miss it terribly, especially some of the wilderness, the parks, the national parks that are around it, the Mulgreen Algonquin Park. I miss terribly.
Oh, wonderful. And out of all those films that you've directed, like combined with the television films, I think they amount to like over 100 of films. You've always said during your interviews that Voyage Around My Father, it's the one for you that stands out. Why is that?
Because it's good. Because it's a good story, well acted, and I told it well. I was lucky. The photography is good. Yes, working with Laurence Olivier was an occasion not to be missed, and I was very fortunate that I did, and fortunate that we made The Voyage Around My Father, and he was so good in it. So yeah, it stands out. As I said to you earlier, I think Don Quixote also is another favorite of mine. But one doesn't often get to choose the favorites, and it's amazing what the public likes. You say Passport to Shame is now receiving kudos. I find that surprising, since it's such a little trashy film to me. An even worse film that I made called Death Ship has become a cult film, I understand. People insist on seeing it, and I think it's awful. Excuse me.
So I just remembered, as you mentioned, the adventures of Don Quixote, and you were just telling me that you've contacted the officials at the BBC, and they still don't want to release to unleash the film and the footage of that film for a public release, which is a shame.
I think that's putting it too strongly. You don't know who to contact. It's an organization as vast as the BBC. There isn't one person saying, no, you can't do it. You get a series of being put off to office after office. So I've never been able to track down who I appeal to, even.
Probably the Director General, Tim Davie.
Sorry?
The Director General of the BBC, Tim Davies or Davie.
I've never approached him. I said maybe I should.
Yes, he's the Director General, taking over from Tony Hall.
Right.
So probably, yes, hopefully, fingers crossed, he could be off.
Okay. Can you spell his name?
Tim Davies. I'm going to send you his details after
Good.
this.
Please do.
With pleasure. And out of all these actors that you worked with, there is like a whole list I was looking at. Peter Cushing, Richard Harris, Rod Steiger, Eddie Constantine, Sean Connery, with literally all of them, all of those legends, Ava Gardner, Kenneth Moore. You've worked with all of them. Who's the one that stands out for you and working with?
I enjoy working. I enjoy the fact that I was a director. I enjoyed it enormously. I enjoyed telling stories, as we discussed. So to pick one out is almost impossible. I enjoyed most of them. There are very few of them I didn't enjoy. Even Rex Harrison, who was the biggest pain in the neck ever. I enjoyed working with him because I enjoyed the result. So I can't just pick out one actor and say he's my favorite. And certainly, also the thing, as I point out in my second book, is it's all very well to talk about the famous Ava Gardner, Rod Steiger, etc. But there are so many actors who don't quite make it, who are so good that as a director I relied on and really enjoyed working with. I mean, the names like Denham Elliott, sort of half-known names like Denham and like I don't know, Celia Johnson, etc. These people are just as great a joy to work with as the stars, and so I won't name anybody.
Indeed. And apart from you really wanted to work with Richard Burton, but due to the circumstances at the time, it never happened. Was there any other actor that you really wanted to work with, but unfortunately it couldn't happen at the time?
Two actors that I regret I didn't work with in my time, is Paul Scofield, who I admired enormously as an actor, for his economy and for his difference and for his strength. And the other one is James Mason. I wish I'd worked with both Mason and Scofield, and very much regret that I never had the opportunity.
Of course, Scofield.
I mean, we're going to have to, my throat is going to go, so we're going to have to stop soon.
Not at all. Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure talking to you, and thank you very much for your time. And apologies again that you got cut off.
No, it's all right.
We're back on the track.